All right. Welcome to the ACTO forum call. It is Wednesday, March 16th, 2016, and this is our monthly ACTO forum call. And ACTO is a dynamic community of peers on the leading edge of training excellence and innovation. And we're very happy to present these calls every month in both English and Spanish. Other speakers for the Spanish calls. Don't worry, Paul. I just want to put in a little plug for our conference, which is coming up in June. Registration is open. Our conference this year is from June 15th to 17th in Phoenix. And if you go to our website, actoonline.org, we have a list of all of the presenters that will be there this year. Our slate of presenters is finalized. Very, very happy with the slate that we have to present to you. We have our keynotes finalized. We will have Linda Miller from the Blanchard Group, and we have Jennifer Kahnweiler as well. We'll be doing our closing keynote. So we're excited about that. Also very excited to announce that we have a live PCC marker training the day before the conference begins on June 14th. Which is, as far as we know, the only opportunity to do this training live that's being offered by the ICF in the world right now. And so we've finalized that as well. So go to the website to register or find out anything you would like about that conference, and we'd love to see you there. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Paul Scheele. Welcome from Orlando today, I understand. So, Paul is known to a number of you, many of you, has been in this world for 30 plus years, speaking and teaching, and he is the founder of Scheele Learning Systems, which is an international consulting firm, and he offers keynote presentations, in-depth trainings, executive mentoring, and he works with executives to create sustainable returns through the discovery of vast, untapped inner resources within their organizations. His work has been translated into 18 languages, has been sold in 185 different countries, and numerous well-known peak performance experts such as Jack Canfield, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy have worked with and endorsed Paul's work. He has degrees in biological sciences, learning and human development technology, and a PhD in leadership and change. His background includes expertise in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, brain-based accelerated learning, pre-conscious processing, and transformative change. So we're very, very excited to have Paul with us today. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Paul, and he will share his screen, and you will get to see his presentation. So take it away.
Thanks very much, Hallie. And I also want to do a shout out to Ana Escalante, who invited me to participate. So thank you all. And thanks for the support in getting on Zoom with you. This is a first time for me to be a presenter on one. So thank you. Yes, I am in Orlando. I'm normally based in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And you can find me at scheelelearning.com or Paul at Scheele Learning, and I'll show you that in a screen in just a moment. The idea of my background, NLP and accelerated learning, pre-conscious processing, has led me to the opportunity to do some research on how do people actually transform. We've got some interesting noise coming through. I'm not sure what that is. But the research methodology that I developed for my dissertation was to study the critical incident of transformation. So when we work with somebody and a transformation occurs, I developed a research methodology that can study how that happened. So it's a mixed methods study. Very exciting because I did have the opportunity to include a way of coding the way in which the language that a person used to describe their transformation came through in terms of their sensory systems and their sorting principles, if you're familiar with NLP. And I'm happy to send that dissertation or an excerpt of it to anybody who's interested, either in the methodology or the findings of it. The findings have led me to develop a number of programs that can help facilitate transformation in individuals. So organizations, corporations, executives can actually learn to become better facilitators of transformation within their organizations and teams. So on to the presentation today, if we could. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this is all going to work out exactly right. Can you see that all right?
Yeah. And I just want to remind everybody that to shrink the presentation so you can see it, click the little options tab at the top, and then click fit to screen, fit to window, I think it says, and then you'll be able to see it. Go ahead.
Okay, so you can all see this okay, and it's fitting pretty well? Okay, good. So the email address for me, Paul S at Scheele, or it's actually Paul at ScheeleLearning.com. The S is not correct. I just noticed, but Paul S at Learning Strategies, but Paul at Scheele Learning. If you have additional questions, I'd be happy to respond to you about all of that. And I want to suggest that why we're here is for you and your clients to really enjoy a life of full expression. When I use the term our fullest expression, it has to do with a particular model that I've been developing that I'll be sharing with you. So here we go. If you could think about why most people come to you, usually we can think of it in this quadrant model of there's a present negative and a future positive. You can see this on the screen here. The notion being that if a person's present negative situation is that they have certain things that they don't want, they are generally interested in orienting towards what they want and don't have. And so this is the notion of personal growth, human development, is the shift toward a more positive future. But why they need our help most often isn't because they're unclear about this. It's really about these other two dimensions. And it has to do with the fact that a lot of times we have things that we want and we want to keep, and there are some future possibilities that we don't want and don't have. And as a result of that, the design of our nervous system causes us to freeze right there. We get into stuck states, if you will. So oftentimes when we talk about the process of change, we've got these forces moving us forward, and we've got these forces that are moving us back, trying to head us in the opposite direction. So really what we have to do is we have to facilitate with our clients the ability to release what we currently have that we don't want and figure out what we can do differently. And while we know that we want to achieve some kind of outcome or goal, the truth is we really need to inquire more deeply into some of the motivations that put that on our radar to begin with, because oftentimes when people are attempting to accomplish a solution to a current problem, what often happens is they use the same problem-solving strategy that got them there to begin with. And so we end up just doing more of the same, unintended consequences, right? So we also have to figure out not only how to keep the goodies that we now have, but actually be able to do more with what we do have. And then ultimately to really embrace those things that we fear most about an uncertain future and begin to challenge some of our big assumptions about those fears. As you know, people don't really discover the fullness of who they are until they recognize the things behind their fears, the powers that are held behind the fears that they're currently holding. So in this model, I don't know, Hallie, is your picture in the way of the upper right-hand corner? You're on mute, so I can't really hear you there.
People can move the picture of the speaker window on their own screen.
Okay, but are they seeing your photo like I am right now?
It depends what they chose. There's different boxes at the top. They can choose a small active speaker window. They can choose a gallery. And they can move that whole window by just clicking on it, as can you. So we're seeing our own version of this. We're not seeing yours.
Oh, got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we think about the emerging future as trying to land in our present moment, and we can think of the status quo as the history that's brought us here right now, ultimately what we're attempting to do is move from status quo to emerging future. So at any moment in time, we could say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is the future, 1 is status quo. We haven't even begun thinking of it. Present state would be some number on the scale from 1 to 10. So when you think about where you're trying to get to in your life as a 10 on the scale of 1 to 10, what does your ideal future really look, sound, and feel like? And then where are you today, present state? On a scale of 1 to 10, if you say 3, I say, great, why so high and not lower? This is a concept called solutions focus. Most people would say, only a 3, why so low? But if you ask that question, they're only going to bring up all the limitations that they have, the blocks, the barriers, the things that stay in the way. If you ask, why so high and not lower, they're going to talk about present resources that have gotten them this far. Then what we're interested in doing is adapting, finding new choices and options in order to go one step up the scale from a 3 to a 4, or from a 7 to an 8, wherever you are today, to some next step on the way to the emerging future. We're always going to get feedback when we make that shift. And then this interaction here, this feed forward, feedback, the faster, tighter, more rapid we can make that, the more we can steer in a dynamic way toward the emerging future. And so this concept of dynamic steering is one that comes out of the agile software development. Brian Robertson and Holacracy talks about this a bit, but this concept of dynamic steering is ultimately what we're attempting to do with our clients when we're working with them, is help to not only be clear about where we're headed, but also what's the next one small step that we could take in that direction and what effect that has on us. The challenge that we have is, I'm going to pass this one. The challenge that we have is that we have what's called a paradoxical design. It's biphasic in nature. So physically, we have extensor and flexor muscle groups. From a nervous system perspective, we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So there's one pushing forward and one pulling back, right? Just like our physiological design. And neurologically, we have a left and right hemisphere. And so this biphasic nature of our system, when we have the conflict, interior conflict between trying to move forward to the future and trying to pull back to keep us safe, that's what ends up really causing us to get stuck. Now, that same biphasic nature shows up in a personality design. For example, on any continuum of your personality, we could see the same thing happening. Are you strong-willed or are you easygoing? The answer is yes, of course. And it just depends on what's the situation like. You can be strong-willed up to a point, and then you're steamrolling over people and really not helping them out. And if you're too easygoing, people get to use you as a doormat. So you're always going to find a comfort zone between these two endpoints and the biphasic nature. So what I've discovered is that these simultaneous opposites that exist have to be able to cooperate in order for us to move. Now, the nature of it is really great that we have it. It's like the counterbalanced weight in an elevator. So in an elevator, we have a counterbalance that allows the elevator to slow and stop on any floor. With our musculature, it allows us to make smooth movements instead of lurching and falling. Right? So it's a wonderful thing that we have this. The problem is that it can really get in our way. So while it gives us precise tuning and it gives us precise choice, at any point along the way, it can also cause us to become stuck if the power of each of the signals is equally strong. So there are three continuums that I have found most significant in working with leadership and change. The first is the thinking-feeling continuum. So you could think one way about what you want, but you might feel another way. And if your thinking and feeling are disconnected, if they're fighting with each other, you're stuck. You're not going to move. Your nervous system will cause you to stop right where you are. The other continuum is personal social. And this has to do with our relational process. So who are you when you're alone with yourself? Who are you when you're in a social setting? Is it okay for you to show up authentically as you are, or is the fear of going to shut you from actually showing up the way you want to? So this is the second dimension. Third dimension is the intentional and behavioral dimension. And this is, you could have the intention to do something, but it doesn't show up in your behavior. You keep behaving some way other than that. If there's an incongruence here, again, your true power isn't going to be able to show up and be effective in the world. So these three continuums end up becoming the focal point, not only for a diagnostic, a way of diagnosing where our clients are at any moment in time, but also being able to rectify that disconnect between the two endpoints, and to be able to get everything working harmoniously, congruently, in alignment, including all of who we are, and congruently moving forward into the world to where we want to go. So this is what ended up becoming the central focus of my work. It really had to do with these three dimensions: learning, transforming, and leading. And the first dimension has to do with the alignment of thinking and feeling. That's the continuum between learning and transforming. Feeling is often associated, that the affective is associated with transformation. Most transformation occurs in the affective domain, or the emotional learning. And cognition, or thinking, is often associated with learning. And there's a tremendous amount of scholarship associated with transformative learning. In fact, my dissertation was based mostly on this. And the continuum between transforming and leading, we have that personal, social continuum. And this is what we would call relational processes, being able to include all of who we are, being able to include everyone in our organizations, everyone that, it's not just diversity, it's about inclusion, right? It's being able to have all of the resources available and showing up. And there's a tremendous amount of scholarship around what we would call transformational leadership. And then the third domain, this third continuum, is the intentional behavior. And this is where, our ability to learn and our ability to leads to a tremendous realm of scholarship called leadership development. Now, if you have a need to do training within an organization, for example, you could put the concept in the middle of this model, and you'll immediately have three curriculums that would emerge. A curriculum that would be for personal growth and development, that would be the left side of the triangle. A curriculum that would be associated with leaders and relations, that would be at the bottom of the model. And then for the executive group, the top leadership, that would be on the right side of the model. Now, all of these are really designed to connect us with the true source, that power and presence that's within each of us, to come out in the world most fully. If there's a disconnect, source can't express itself through us. And so reconnecting is also a process of going inward and making contact with source in order to figure out what is it that's caused this disconnect, and how can we reconnect with our true nature and power.
Well, I have a question that might be timely just to help clarify. Leanne Roque is asking about the intentional behavioral spectrum and whether it's representative of a disconnect in one of the other continua.
Well, yes. I mean, if there is, for example, a personal social disconnect, then that's going to show up in behavior. But to keep it clear, I would be better off serving my client to identify that it's the inability of a person to be authentic in their relationships that's led to the particular disconnect in behavior. So as you can see, a human being really is about all of this. We could try to segment it, but when we look at this from a diagnostic model, we're going to be able to quickly figure out what is the reason that they cannot show up in the fullness of their power. And it will be identified either as an inability to show up with an open mind, an inability to show up with an open heart, or an inability to show up with an open will. So the open will is the right side of the model. The open heart is the bottom of the model. The open mind is the left side of the model. And this relates to Otto Scharmer's work in Theory U. And it also relates to the work of Keegan and Leahy in the model Immunity to Change. So the confluence of scholarly thinking on this, I think, is quite important if you want to dive in more deeply. And again, I can send the work of my dissertation to help clarify a lot of this. Does that help, Hallie?
Let's see what Leanne says. It helps me.
Yes, it's helpful.
Okay.
I mean, what I'm hearing is that it's a training function on the right side. that they want to do it. They've got the alignment in the thinking and feeling and in the personal and social, but they just don't know how.
Okay. Let's say that they do know how. Let's say that training isn't an issue and it's still not showing up. So I would be looking at it from that standpoint. So what is the performance deficit? Is it a know-how issue? Then training and development should be able to correct it. But if training and development isn't correcting it, then it's something deeper that's showing up. So for example, on a team, you may have a team that is well compensated. There is a great climate and environment of cooperation and communication within the organization. And there's, they have excellent knowledge and skills training. And, it seems like everything should go well. So what's going on? This is the notch deeper that would quickly bring to the surface what's happening. This is the idea that when we do leadership development, we've got the leader needing to be developed, and we also have the leader within the context of the organization as being a very separate thing. So when I do training and development, my feeling is we need to get at all three of these domains. We need to be on the left side to get the personal growth and development together. We need to be on the relational part, that's at the bottom of the model. And we need to be thinking in terms of the context of the organization, where I show up and how is my behavior congruent or incongruent with our mission, our goals, our vision, our strategic objectives. And if there is not good execution on strategy, we can definitely trace it back to this issue. So thanks for the clarification. I appreciate that. So to move on to this idea, the future has a tendency to be unknown and uncertain for us. And when it is, then what mind is designed to do is to do what's called downside planning. Like, what possible thing could go wrong? And as a result of that, the image of uncertainty and a lack of resources will create a state of anxiety within us. Anxiety has to be produced. There is no anxiety in a person's body in the present moment. You can't be in the present moment and feel anxiety. It's not possible. The only way for a person to feel anxious is to imagine themselves in a future situation without the resources they need to successfully handle that situation. And as a result, the body will produce a state of anxiety. And I'll show it to you in another way. If we think about access to resources on the left and time on the x-axis, then we know fairly easily that in the near term, we know the next couple of steps we can take in the direction of our goal. In the long term, yeah, we know it will be like when we arrive there. We have a good sense of this, what's the success is going to feel like, look like, where we're headed. We're all in agreement. It looks terrific. Okay, let's go. So we take the first few steps, and then we come up against a threshold of what's unknown. And in this gap, what happens is that the mind lobs in there all the images from our history of things where we've screwed up, where we've messed up, where we've got problems, where things have gone awry, we missed, oh my gosh, what would happen if? And at this point, we have what are called threshold guardians that show up. And threshold guardians are deep archetypes, but they're also, really designed there to stop us at the edge of the unknown to say, hey, and this is the hero's journey, right? So the threshold guardians stop us to say, hey, are you really prepared to handle this? But they're fierce and they're a bit scary. So, they keep us from stepping into the abyss, that very place where we know we have to go. And so where my work led me is to something quite important about working at this level. So let's just talk about this for a second. What shows up is the three major fears. First is the fear of the self-concept. This is the fear of the open mind, right? The judge says, well, hold it, you're not worthy for this. You're not good enough. There's nothing in your history that indicates that you're going to be able to handle this. The second is, if you do this and you screw up, you're going to be alone. You're going to be excluded from your tribe, your community, and you don't belong here. And the third, that's open heart, right? This one is the fear of the open heart, self-esteem. And then here, the self-confidence, fear of the open will, that you're not going to be safe. You really can't trust that others will have your back. And it's my claim that we could collapse any fear, worry, concern, and associate it with one of these three big fears. That may be a big, bold statement to make, but it's something that I've been able to defend pretty well so far. So the immunity to change system kicks in. These are neurological. There's a neurological basis to these guardians, okay? So the knowing system is essentially organizing our realities. So when something new shows up, it says, wait, hold on a moment. I'd never heard of this before. Where did this come from? How's this going to be possible? I've never seen this before. Doesn't make any sense. And then there's the feeling system, and that's essentially managing anxiety. Again, we'll put this at the head, the heart, and then the change prevention system. And this is thwarting challenging aspirations. Now, this is Keegan and Leahy's model called immunity to change. And if you think of the guardians as neurological, psychological, physiological, it doesn't matter. There's a good basis for this, the argument that we're going to confront it, because everything inside of us is designed to prevent change from occurring. It doesn't make sense, but essentially, our neurophysiology doesn't want the boat to start rocking. It does. Just let's keep calm. Let's carry on. Let's not get things in a mess, right? The ancient wisdom say, hold on a moment. The true self is consciousness and bliss, and that thou art. The ancient wisdom, the thousands of year old studies in consciousness say who you are is consciousness and bliss, and that thou art. You're whole and complete just the way you are. You are a co-creative power with the very universe as we know it. Who you are is ever free, ever pure, and ever wise. Now, interestingly, if you take these phrases from the ancient traditions and you map it across to these models, theory U and immunity to change, you're going to get the same thing. Ever free is free will. Ever pure is pure heart. Ever wise is the wise mind. So the open mind, open heart, open will map across to these ancient traditions, right? So that's showing up and expressing the fullness of who we are, is expressing the true self. The true self being ever free, ever pure, ever wise. You don't need to search outside of you for all the wisdom of the universe. It's all within you. The kingdom of heaven is within, right? So we've got these traditions showing us this magnificence that's within us. This is what I've devoted 40 years of my professional life to. And yet our experience is I have hurt people and I've been hurt. I've messed up. And, it's tough. And so my brain, my emotions, my body want to avoid that kind of pain and suffering in the future. That's the way it is. So the guardians are going to keep me from that to happen. We're ever free, ever pure, and ever wise, but we fear the insufficiency. The insufficiencies of safety, the insufficiency of belonging, the insufficiency of worthiness. Okay, again, ever wise, that's the wise mind. I am worthy, right? That's the self-concept. Ever pure, pure of heart. That's the heartfelt, emotional intelligence, connection, alone, being with others, belonging. Ever free, free will. That's a feeling of safety. Are you mapping this? Hopefully you're getting this connection here. And I am going quickly on this, I know. But I do want to try to get the whole thing to you in a short time frame. So on the one hand, we've got this emerging future and we want to step into it. Yeah. On the other hand, we've got these fears and concerns pulling us back. And this is where coaching comes in, right? It's at this. This is called the disorienting dilemma. And the disorienting dilemma, by all scholarship on transformation, the disorienting dilemma is the beginning of all transformation. Until we have this disorienting dilemma, nothing's going to change. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? People are more willing to accept a familiar problem than an unfamiliar solution. It's the Declaration of Independence in the United States. For those of you who aren't from here, it says, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they have become accustomed. We're more willing to stay in a status quo, even though it's producing misery, than to go toward an unknown future. So coaching is always facilitating that shift towards possibility, accessing the resources necessary to step into the future, and doing the dynamic steering, the rapid feedback that would help us get better. So when it comes to these three gaps, thinking, feeling gap, the personal social gap, the intention behaving gap, we then have three guardians, and these are the ego functions that protect us from these big fears. And these are deep archetypes. This is in the Buddhist temple in Nara in Japan, one with the mouth closed, one with the mouth open. That's ah and the concept of Om. It's birth and death. And so these guardians, the temple guardians, are guarding the body temple, they're guarding the Buddha, the enlightened one, the true self, right? Metaphorically. Fierce, but they show up in a lot of different forms throughout human history. In the traditions of the Nordic, this is Heimdall, the guardian at the front of the Rainbow Bridge looking over all of the galaxies. In the Chinese traditions, we've got these four guardians, and fascinating to me, if you look at all of these guardians are standing on the demons, sword, one with the scroll and a brush, one with a light and illumination, one with a spear or a lance. And notice also that these same guardians are seen as guardian angels in the Christian tradition. And what are the demons? You know, these are the thoughts of temptation. These are the thoughts, I'm not worthy, I'm not going to be loved. You know, it's all of that. So in China, we have these guardians of the universe as well. So the guardian voices show up for us. The voice of judgment is guardian of the open mind. The voice of cynicism is a guardian of the open heart. The voice of fear is a guardian of the open will. And so what I have found to be a useful exercise is to bring the opposites at each end of these continuums together and actually help these opposing forces, the part of me that wants to lead me toward the emerging future and the part of me that wants to pull me back. You know, I want to bring those two together within me. It's a process I call the new option generator. I've created a recording on it, a home study course called Natural Brilliance. The paraliminal recording that I designed called New Option Generator does this as well. And when the two opposite ends, the two opposing forces can actually cooperate, communicate, and learn from each other, then they get, whoa, 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 the part of me that's trying to lead forward wants to see my future safety by growing and expanding and getting where I want to go. The part of me that wants to keep me safe by protecting me and maintaining the status quo is going to keep me safe and happy by not changing. Well, they're both interested in my best interest. They both have my best interest in mind. But these two opposites, if they're not cooperating like the extensor and flexor groups of the body, the sympathetic and parasympathetic of the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, if they're not cooperating, they conflict, and the conflict causes us to freeze, to stop. And so connecting to resources, I use something called eidetic psychotherapy, the idola. We actually merge with that future self, the wise elder, instead of the wounded inner child that the guardians are trying to protect. We connect with the future self, the wise inner elder, who at the end of our lives, breathing his or her last breath, recognizes that you're okay. It's all right. Things are fine. And as a result of that, the guardians get what I would call a firmware update. They change from being a guardian of change to a guardian for change, or an ally in the change that we are attempting to bring about. So I find that in bridging these steps, these gaps that exist, the best techniques are always going to be from a place of really understanding the truth of who we are and the magnificence of our resources and the positive intentions behind all of our conflicts, that they really do have a positive intent. Connecting, best techniques are always going to connect us to inner resources. And it's not that the resources are outside of us, they really are within. And then finally, that whatever it is that we do can become your ongoing practice. It's really quite a powerful thing. If anybody is interested in studying more about this, I do have a 2-day workshop on it, and you can find out some information about it. Happy to send you that. I do want to say that it was in writing a book about using more of the resources of the non-conscious that this principle of the guardians of change showed up for me, and the guardians wouldn't let me go. They said, you have got to write, you've got to bring this idea out into the world. So, I do want to encourage anybody to let me know if you're interested in any of this. The idea is that we really need to identify any disconnects or disorienting dilemmas, and we need to then be able to reassign the role of the guardian at the threshold to actually become an ally for the change that we desire. So I'm going to open this up to questions and answer questions that may be here. I know that there's to stop sharing here and get back on video. So let's open it up to some questions and answers. We can get into the model in a little more depth.
Right. And for those of you who are on the phone, if you want to unmute, I did mute you, press *6. And if you are on Zoom, you can unmute yourself by clicking on the picture of the microphone in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. For questions.
How about you, Hallie? Do you have questions that showed up for you?
I think you're hitting on the absolute crux of every frustration I've ever had as a coach. So it's a little overwhelming to think of one question because all of them begin with how, and I don't like asking how questions. But it seems like the awareness of this will provide some other places to look when we're supporting our clients, and just the awareness of these continuum and like thinking about which one I'm talking to. So
good, thanks. And I want to emphasize this. Almost invariably, we're going to hear people saying, on the one hand, I really want blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, I really blah, blah, blah. And at that moment, literally, you can see this fissure between the two halves of this person. And over the years, doing hypnosis, doing NLP, I kept seeing that it was always about this kind of collapsing of the opposites. So they called it visual squash in the early NLP days, but it's this idea of collapsing these two endpoints. And when it did, there became this integration where people suddenly go, wow, I'm really at peace. Now, I still don't know what's going to happen in order for me to do anything next, but I'm not conflicted anymore. I say, good. You see, because it's from here, you now have access to all the resources that before were just split aside and unavailable. There's a stop sign here, stop sign there. Mm-hmm. So I'm writing about this, my second book, Natural Brilliance, and teaching it and guiding this technique. I kept seeing the same model, the same pattern, and doing my dissertation work, getting the scholarship behind Theory U and Keegan and Leahy's work in over our heads, and then their work on immunity to change. It just kept coalescing into this same model over and over and over and over again, until I started realizing this is the fundamental human struggle. We're trying to become a landing strip for this future that's emerging, this fuller expression of ourselves, but we're busily protecting ourselves because when we came into the world, we came in utterly helpless, and we were socialized to believe we're not enough. We're socialized to believe you don't have what you need. You got to go find it. You got to go get an education. You got to go do this, and you got to be that way. And so a lot of times people show up in coaching because they say, I'm doing everything that I was told to do, and it's still not working. What's going on? And we don't see the trance of our blind spots, our socialization pulling us off the very threshold of our next steps in life. So it was very exciting to me to see this all emerge as a fabulous pattern.
Yeah, do you ever share this continuum with the client? Because
Always.
okay, so like part of what I imagine is that if I can support people to recognize what is real, whatever that means, and because one of the things you said was supporting people in letting go and releasing things. So, you know, to look at a fear and be able to release it, it seems like they need to be able to recognize where it sits on a continuum of reality, let's say.
Yes.
So, okay.
See, and I believe that if we think about fears as stop signs, you know, you can be strong-willed only to this point, and then the stop sign is right there that says, do not go further. None shall pass. You know, it's like boom, right there, because you had the experience. When you went beyond that, you screwed up. It was ugly. Don't go past this point. So we just got a boundary for our comfort zone. My comfort zone goes right up to the stop sign. Now, on the opposite side, I'm going to be easygoing. Oops, but don't go past this, because remember all the bad stuff that happened when you went past it? Stop sign. So now I've got this comfort zone. And when we have people that are contemplating suicide, their comfort zone has two choices: live with all this pain for the rest of my life, or kill myself now and end all the pain. I mean, they literally, out of the billions of choices they could operate on, they see two. It's the stop signs have kept moving in, kept moving in, kept moving in until they've got no wiggle room. But that's their mental model. And so when we can help someone identify the limits of their mental model by stepping outside, oh, hang on, let's walk behind the stop sign for a moment. You know, there was a great resource when you were a kid. You stuffed into that long bag you've been carrying with you. You've never gone in for that joy, for that creativity, for the happiness. For whatever good reason you had, you stopped living out of the fullness of who you are. Let's reclaim that.
Awesome. Terry.
First of all, thank you, Paul. As always, I feel enlightened and illuminated and mind blown in your presence. I have been studying for 35 years something called the Kybalion. Not Kabbalah, Kybalion, Kybalion. And it's the pulling together of all the ageless wisdom. I can put in the chat who pulled it together. It's open information on the internet, free public domain. And the Kybalion talks about the continuums. Everything is a continuum. And if you go out to the extreme, you lose your ability to respond. However, if you continue on the continuum, you get the two opposites that eventually merge and come back together again. So the Kybalion suggests this is kind of a how, and yet I'm looking at your information and fitting it. The only way to resolve a polarity, extreme opposites, is to go above it. That's the words that are used. To have a dimension of perspective that encompasses both. And I think that's what you were saying by cooperate.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll define it in two ways, because you're right. When we're stuck in what we call the paradigm of problem solution, the level of thinking that put my problem here, right? This is the unintended consequence of my current problem solving model. So I create a solution, which creates a problem, which I then resolve, which creates another problem, which I solve, which creates a similar or worse problem or more problems. So I'm always operating within the same problem solution paradigm, okay? So the only way to resolve this is to solve the way I solve problems. I have to be able to leave that problem solving paradigm to a higher level or what we know as a higher order of thinking. And so as a constructivist, I'm always looking at developmental levels. So the socialized mind is always looking through the lens of its socialization. Thank you, by the way. I'm going to look into that. So thanks for posting it. So we're always looking through the lens. The self-authoring mind is a developmental level beyond that and says, oh, whoa, I'm looking through a lens. And now you're looking at the thing you were looking through. That's a transformational change. Okay. Your meaning making has now shifted. And that is the definition of transformation by many scholars. It's that the subject-object relationship has now changed. So you're no longer subjected to the worldview that you were looking through, right? I can look at the thing I'm looking through. The next developmental level is called self-transforming mind. So the self-transforming mind is actually looking at self-authoring from another level. So as soon as a problem arises, instantly this flood of choices emerges and you're never attached to any single worldview. It's very interesting stuff. And according to research, only about 2% of leaders in organizations are operating out of that self-transforming mind. So if you think about what we're doing, we're really moving people from self-authoring, which is why we got them, right? They've already got, wow, I'm awake enough to see that I can have other choices. I don't know how to exercise those choices. Perfect. Well, we're going to the next logical level to help them generate ways to exercise choices. So we're already getting them enrolled in this concept of generating their own transformations on an ongoing basis. So it's very cool.
Is that also synced with the NLP metacognition?
Sure.
One self, the detached self.
Okay. Or Gregory Bateson's logical levels. So, we can have learning, we have learning how to learn, we have learning how learning to learn takes place. We have learning how to learn takes place. It's 4 logical levels. You can't think at that level. It's too much. But the idea is we're always pushing. That's the threshold of our work. We're always pushing up. How do we now see what we've been looking through? How do we start to examine the models that got us to where we are today? It's metacognition. It's always thinking about our thinking.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Terry. Thanks.
All right. Well, I unfortunately have to cut this conversation off now. We're at our time, and I see a few people have just joined who I think were victims of the time change. So I'm sorry, Anissa, Keys. It is now 10 o'clock Pacific. We changed our clocks last weekend. The recording will be available if you want to share it with peers that you want to see this. And thank you so much, Paul, for being here today. It was a very cool conversation, and I think I need to watch it again to get above it. So thanks for being here, and I just want to remind everybody that we have another call next month, Wednesday, April 20th, and our guest will be Betty Spruill, who will be talking from an ontological perspective about presence and listening and intimacy. So please be here for that. And Paul, any closing words for you?
Yeah, I do encourage you to review what it is we just went through. I really did blast quite quickly through much of this. You'll see the through line of thinking on it. And if you would like to get the opening chapter of my dissertation where the concept of transformation is defined, as well as how we help leaders become facilitators of transformation, how we help our clients become better facilitators of their own transformation, how we help you become better facilitator of transformation. Again, some of the definitions and the scholarly threads are in that. And if you send me an email, I'd be happy to send that out to you. It's paul@scheelelearning.com.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for being here from all over the world. It's great to see your faces, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Ali.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.